So the question is, does age in whiskey really, really matter? And we're going to tackle that question today.
You better be at least 21 years old to enjoy a pour.
Welcome back to another edition of Bourbon Kingdom. I'm David.
And I'm Zach.
And today we're going to talk about age statements on whiskey, and does age really, really matter when it comes to good whiskey?
This is like really a complicated subject.
I do agree with you.
Because the obvious answer is to say yes. But then I can give you a bunch of different distilleries that would tell you otherwise. Now, some of them cheat. You could argue they cheat with like Old Forester, where they heat cycle. Buffalo Trace has their heat cycling and stuff like that. Like the heat cycling stuff where you're like, you're gaining so much age because like all that stuff. I get it, right?
I get it too.
But then you also look at like certain other distilleries like Chattanooga, for example. Most of that stuff's 2 to 3 years old.
2 to 3 years old.
Wyoming whiskey has a bunch of younger whiskey that I think's really good. Redwood Empire has a bunch of younger whiskey that's really good. So it's a little bit more complicated than just saying, older whiskey's better.
Yeah, before we really, really jump in, hit the like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and that way you can be made aware of all the videos and all that stuff when they pop up. And we always appreciate your also love and support.
Yeah. So, first question. Is older whiskey just better?
Again, generally speaking, I would say yes.
First off, what are we calling older whiskey?
To me, I would say 10 plus years.
I kind of say like anything over 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there. So we're kind of close-ish.
I feel like 7 and 8, and I feel like I would say 9 to 10. I would agree with the 9 part, but I feel like the 7 to 8, like you're just kind of really rounding into form and an age for whiskey. Because I think I can argue there are some older whiskeys that are perfect at that 17 year, 18, stuff like that. There are some really good whiskeys at that, but I feel like a good sweet spot is anywhere between that 12 to 15 year. Like there's just a lot of good whiskey in that.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
And so to me, that's where I look and I go, man, that is a real sweet spot that feels really good to find bourbon and whiskey in that age range. So
I think the thing with older whiskey, it's so dependent on the company.
Yeah.
Like we just did a review of Elijah Craig Batch A. It's 10 years, 7 months.
Yep, 10 years, 6 or 7 months.
Whatever it is. We didn't love it.
No.
That's 10-year-old whiskey.
It is.
In theory, you should love 10-year-old whiskey coming from a big distillery.
You should.
We reviewed, what's another one we reviewed not too long ago? I felt like we reviewed one that was fairly young. I can't even remember what it is. But then we also just reviewed the Jack Daniel's 14. We loved it. We loved 10. We loved 12.
Yeah.
All the stuff from Chattanooga that we've pretty much reviewed, that we've talked about.
Young.
It's all young, pretty much. And we've all really enjoyed that. It's just tough because I would say majority of the time, younger whiskey does better than younger. Older whiskey does better than younger whiskey in pretty much all formats. But it also comes down to blending. It also comes down to distillery. Because I'll tell you right now, the stuff that we're seeing on like the source market right now, the Heaven Hill stuff I've had so far has been great. But the next best thing I've tried is the Green River stuff, and it's all around 5 to 6 years old.
Yeah, 5 to 6 years old.
Literally fantastic.
Yeah, and I would consider that young. Like to me, that's
just like a whiskey coming into like.
I feel like Chattanooga is like super young.
Yeah,
but
it still works. Same thing with Redwood Empire. Yeah. You drink Redwood Empire more than
like all that stuff works. I'm just saying, like those are super young. Mm-hmm. Then the 5 to 6, 7 year old is like young. Then the 8 to 10 to 12 is mature, and then anything over that to me is like I would consider old.
But let me say this though. There's even big boys, and I understand heat cycling with Old Forester. Most of their stuff's 4 to 6 years old.
Yeah.
So, but we're talking big boys right now. A lot of that craft whiskey cannot wait to get to 5 years old.
No, you can't. You got to get they got to get their money out of it.
They have to start making their money now.
Yeah.
And so it's really tough for a lot of these craft brands to compete with that. So they got to blend, the finishing is one thing. I'm not even worried about that because I kind of I think hide stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
Or can hide stuff, like some youthiness of that. But I think it's really hard to do it right with younger whiskey at times, depending on what kind of barrels you have, where you're aging, what stocks you have of what. So obviously whenever, older age comes around, but I'll say this though, I hold you to a higher standard with that.
Yeah.
Next question though, and I'm just going to go straight into this one. Does age really matter when it comes to like LEs, single barrels, etc., shelfers, etc.?
Yeah. I have a tendency to say that when people are putting LEs out, even though we've had a discussion, I don't know if it'll be the video before this or not, but this discussion of like LEs and are there too many LEs and all that kind of stuff. But the truth is like when we think of limited edition stuff, generally speaking, it's some of the stuff that they've been aging up in the top rafters of their rick houses and moving it around. And so it's going to naturally have age to it in a way that lends itself to being a little more special. And so I'm trying to think through like LEs, like real LEs.
Well, I'm just thinking through
that aren't aged.
Well, I'm just thinking through our top 10 this year. I think Booker's Reserve was our youngest one we had on there.
Yeah, probably so.
Probably. Yeah. And I mean, behind it, like, and like that was like within our top 10. Yeah. And then really you have to go like the 11th spot, I think, was the Penelope American Light Whiskey. I was 15 years old. And then you have to get all the way up to like the Tanninger, I think, and that's 5 years old. So that was and that's a great whiskey. That thing is utterly amazing. So I'm sitting here thinking to myself, just like out of the whiskeys we blinded and where we put them all, like Jack Daniels was like 9 years, I think 9 years in the Coy Hill, and like the PC was like 12 years old, 11 years old, something like that. All of these big age statements on these whiskeys, when done right, is awesome. Now, look, that doesn't always necessarily mean
that they're going to be right.
It's going to be right.
Yeah.
But
I think the age helps it.
It's not that, let me say this. I don't know if the age necessarily helps it, but whenever I'm spending a significant amount of money on like an LE, for example, a couple $100, whatever it is, $150, $100 even, it does have a little comfort in there when it's a high age statement.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, and I don't even know where this math came from, but when everybody's like $10 for every year, or whatever, I don't know who ever came up with that, but we all kind of somewhere in the grand scheme of things,
probably has something to do with the taxes that they have to pay on them.
Probably.
That's kind of how they probably judge it or whatever.
But we all kind of sat down and like said like, oh, we like this math, and then certain other brands like Wild Turkey, for example, they're like, I don't care about that math. Like it's going to be as expensive as possible. So, and then you take somebody like Buffalo Trace, or like, oh, we don't like that math. We think it should be less. My point to solve this is that I think whenever it comes to something that's supposed to be a special bourbon, I think whenever you have a higher age statement on there and you're charging more money for it as a consumer, like what we are, we feel better about buying that.
Yeah, I wouldn't feel as good about buying an LE if I knew it was aged 3 or 4 or 5 years and it was $250 or something like that.
Yeah,
I would feel really weird about that. And so, I guess in that sense, I feel better about my LEs having aged to them. Like they've had time to marinate in the barrel. They've had time to like ebb and flow through the temperatures. Like the 14-year, we got the whole little temperature gauge that happened, and you just saw the highs and lows of what and so you just think about the liquid in that Jack Daniel's 14 going into the wood of the barrel, squeezing out of the wood of the barrel, going back into just getting so much exposure to the inner part of the woods. Like you just appreciate, like, it's going to have some complexity to it. It's going to have some flavors that you just don't get if you're not aging it long enough in a general sense. Now, I know you can cheat a little bit again with the heat cycles and stuff like that, but I think generally speaking, like, you want as many years as you can on some of this highly allocated, i.e. LE kind of things that we're talking about. And you want the age to kind of just add characteristics to it that you just don't get, generally speaking, with a young one.
Yeah. I mean, I totally tend to agree. And, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, some of the best shelfer bourbon, like, for example, why do we like Rare Breed so much? Well, Rare Breed has older whiskey in it. Elijah Craig Small Batch, which is a popular of many people, that has older whiskey in it. Like, there's just a bunch of shelfers out there. Even, Barstown Bourbon Company, for example. I mean, all that's like minimum 6 years. So there's just a bunch of stuff out there that has a little bit older whiskey that we tend to enjoy.
Yeah,
with it. So,
so is the answer that older is better?
I mean, I don't want to say yes, but I tend to lean towards it. It tends to help more than hurt.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. There are brands out there such as, I'm picking on Heaven Hill a lot here, and I'm not meaning to, but like Elijah Craig 18, I love Elijah Craig 18.
Yeah.
It tends to be over-oaked. I tend not to enjoy it. I used to say the same thing about Henry McKenna. Henry McKenna's kind of turned it around and really have enjoyed a bunch of that stuff. So, there's something, I don't want to say it's thrilling about it, but, there's a lot of comfort there. I think with knowing that something's older, I think there's a lot of comfort in spending money in something that's older. Again, it doesn't always mean it works. Look at Whistle Pig. A lot of that stuff's older, and not the biggest fan of it.
Yeah. I think I would say in my LEs and allocated stuff, I tend to agree that older is generally better, but my shelfers, I don't care. Like, it can be 2 years, it could be,
Yeah.
If it's good and it's a shelfer, I don't care how old it is, because my expectation isn't there for it to be something that it's not. Like, I know, like, this is a $25, $35, $40 bourbon.
Yeah.
I don't care what the age is. If it's good and it's one of those things that I just enjoy drinking, great. But if it's something I'm going to spend a lot of money on, I feel like the age on it helps me feel like that.
And I think there's also certain brands. So, like, you take, what is it, Smoke Eye Hill, for example. We know that's 5 years old.
Yeah.
That's a craft brand. I'm more, like, I'm just, by my nature, I'm more open to having craft brands be younger than major brands.
Yeah.
Because I know how hard it is to get to that point when you're first starting out and everything.
True.
So, like, I feel like I'm much more reasonable to that kind of stuff. And then you take somebody too, like Foregate, for example. Foregate's not cheap. We all know Foregate's not cheap.
Foregate's not cheap.
And their stuff's typically between 6, 8, 9 years old. And you could say the value of the bourbon maybe isn't there compared to the price point, but at the same time, the flavor is amazing.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be exceptions to the rules, and I can go through and I can poke at both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
But I do tend to think that age does matter.
Yeah.
More than, because, like, I can't really think of a 1-year-old bourbon that I love.
Yeah. I'm not.
Very few twos.
So here's the deal. Tell us what you think. Tell us whether you feel like age is a big deal or if it's just one of those things that the bourbon world is made up to make us love older bourbon and chase after older bourbon. So, tell us what you think. And until next time,
We'll see you.
We'll see you.